if you're a lawyer thinking about retirement, money is probably not the biggest incentive that you can have at this point in your career.
I think many of those people still care about money.
Sure.
If that's been your approach for 40 years, I don't think you're going to change it overnight. Welcome to another episode of the Attorney Business Development Podcast. My name is Bill Burns, and I'm here with my podcast partner, Tobi Steineman. And today we're going to talk about a very difficult topic for lawyers and law firms, and that's succession planning.
Hi, Bill. Good to be here. I'm looking forward to discussing it with you. So what do you mean by succession planning, and why do you think it's a business development issue that we need to talk about in a business development podcast?
Well, by succession planning, I mean planning for the movement of partners, whether it's by, they're aging out of their career or whether they're moving on to another firm. You have to hand off that client one way or the other. And it's a very difficult area for a lot of firms. One of the areas where law firms lose business is by failing to plan and execute this type of succession, either when lawyers reach the end of their career or they're taking a lateral move to another firm. And it's really two sides of the same coin. It really affects everybody in the firm because of the loss of business, but it particularly is difficult for that partner who is retiring or leaving his or her career, but also it's difficult for the young lawyers who may not be properly mentored, may be thrown into a situation where they have to pick up a client relationship, and have not been had the opportunity to do that in a focused and disciplined way.
So I mean, it makes sense that there's a need for succession planning when an attorney is like at the end of his or her career, or when they move to an in-house role or something and are not going to be able to advise their clients anymore. But if a client leaves a firm for another firm, is it common to leave behind the clients, or are they usually taking their clients with them?
It's a mixed bag. We talk about how clients are clients of the firm, but if there's only one attorney who has a very strong relationship with that client, it's difficult for the firm to retain the client. And, in that case, if it's just one attorney who's servicing a client, it's difficult to really say it's a firm client. So that hesitancy to get other attorneys involved with the client can really hurt a firm in the long run. When there's some type of a departure.
I guess the bigger your firm is, the higher the chance is also that the client is going to stay with the firm, because there is more of a culture of keeping clients within a firm, whereas in smaller structures like mid-sized firms or even small partnerships, I guess there it's quite common that the lawyers, they take the clients with them to a new firm.
Absolutely, and when we take a lateral partner on, we do everything we can to bring as many of those clients over to our firm from the old firm. So there's every force working against that. The other thing
always
is
a question of a perspective.
Absolutely, it's always a question of perspective. Absolutely. The other thing is, in exit interviews, when young attorneys leave the firm, they quite often cite the lack of opportunity to develop deeper relationships with clients as a reason for leaving. Younger attorneys are very eager to have that client interaction. That's, where they really can learn a lot and develop as attorneys and develop into counselors. And if they don't have that, they feel like, their path to partnership, their path to growth is limited. They just don't have the opportunity they're looking for. So they go seeking it somewhere else.
Yeah, if you're denied a career path, then you look for another door that opens up, and they usually do. So you mentioned that succession planning is something that law firms aren't particularly good at in your views. Why do you think that it does get so little attention in law firms?
Tobi, I think there's quite a few reasons why it doesn't get that attention. I think the major reason, though, is there's a lack of incentives for attorneys to participate in succession planning. Financial incentives or incentives overall drive a lot of our behaviors. And often there's no incentive for properly handing off a client to a younger attorney, or if the firm's compensation structure disincentivizes that type of of planning, then it's going to be ignored or it's going to be an afterthought.
So what would be a disincentivizing element in a compensation structure? What do you mean by that? Or what would be kind of an incentivizing factor?
Well, I think an incentivizing factor would be, for instance, when appropriate in terms of the transition, to maybe do a split billing arrangement, where both attorneys get credit for the billing, because billing credits are very important to driving compensation. I think another thing that might help that is some type of incentive for successfully handling the transition. Let everybody have some skin in the game to make this work. Say the retiring partner, for example, is going to leave over a 3-year period. Once that 3-year period is done, if we retain the client, then both the retiring partner and the partner who picked up the work get some type of incentive for keeping that work in the firm. But I think there's a hesitancy to do that because, most compensation is driven on a year-by-year basis, and trying to take a 3-year look into the future is very difficult because people want to, reap as much as they sow in the current year.
So what are other reasons why you think it's a neglected area?
Well, I think one is it comes from clients. I mean, clients are, hesitant to pay for two attorneys to, they don't want to see someone double bill for time. Clients have, strict requirements about how you bill your time. So I think in many cases, clients get in the way of that succession planning.
Do you think that's an unreasonable thing from a client to say, okay, I'm not going to be willing to pay for that sort of transition?
I don't necessarily think it's unreasonable. I just don't think it's a reflection of a real partnership between the client and the firm. A lot of this stuff comes down to it's almost a commodity transaction, and you want relationships that are deeper than that. But those relationships are few and far between where you can navigate that type of an arrangement.
On the other hand, it's a good way to show the client that you're sort of investing in the relationship as well, right? If you from the beginning say, okay, this is something that we do for you, and we're guaranteeing that sort of this partnership will continue by not billing you for that sort of transition, but we're investing in the relationship as well.
Absolutely. We're making some arrangement with the client where, both the client and the firm have some skin in the game. But, we've all been in situations where we've lost clients because, they found another firm that was going to, charge them less on an hourly basis or, a smaller fee. And we've seen those situations where they realized that the relationship was very important. The knowledge that the firm had of how the client likes to work, the people in the client's legal department like to work, where those clients come back because that relationship really did have value that was missed in the first instance. So having this, those are tough conversations to have. But I think, depending on the client relationship, it's worth exploring. I also think that complacency falls into the picture. I think, there's so many things that attorneys are trying to get done. They have a view that that all clients are clients of the firm, not clients of the individual attorney. But the reality is that relationships are paramount. And, if you lose the client relationship, most often you lose the client. So is it really a firm client if only one attorney is engaged with that client?
Probably not.
Yeah, I think the other factor is this is a difficult topic. I don't think we as a society have figured out how to handle retirement and, aging and work for people who are at the later stages of their career. I think in many cases, retirement was set up for people who did a lot of very physical labor. Well, this is very mental labor, and a lot of people well past the normal retirement age are still mentally sharp and want to continue to work. So it's just in our society, I think it's a difficult topic to talk about first and foremost.
Do you think lawyers are getting pushed out at the later stage of their careers? Is that what you mean?
Firms, I mean, in many firms, you cannot be an equity partner past a certain age. In many firms, you have to retire past a certain age. And I think in many cases, we're losing a lot of valuable experience and knowledge that way. And we're not handling that transition very smoothly. It's a difficult, if you're being told you have to retire at a certain age, it's going to have a big impact on your attitude about how you handle that transition. And I think that makes it a difficult situation for everybody. Somehow we all lose in that scenario.
So how do you make a leaving lawyer care about the transition, other than obviously incentivizing them financially? But if you're a lawyer thinking about retirement, money, if you've done well, money is probably not the biggest incentive that you can have at this point in your career. right? You've done well, you've earned money, so you probably care about other things as well in that
Well,
at that stage.
I think many of those people still care about money.
Sure.
You know, if that's been your approach for 40 years, I don't think you're going to change it overnight. But I think, setting up good mentorship programs, teaching older partners how to mentor, how to bring along a younger attorney to support their practice. Setting up programs like that, I think, can make this a lot easier for everybody involved.
Probably also an attitude and a culture thing, right? I mean, it's not something that you can start with a person once they're sort of starting that transition for themselves. It has to be something that is in the DNA of the firm and in the culture to sort of, we're a team and we're going to do this together, and also give them something that there is something that's going to last from what you've built here, and we're going to make sure that it continues what your life's work, basically. And if you can create that sort of culture and togetherness, then I think there's a higher chance that somebody will also engage in these kind of necessary activities to make the transition smoother.
I couldn't agree more, Toby. One of my favorite phrases is that culture eats strategy for breakfast.
Yeah.
You don't have the proper culture.
You've been to business school, hey?
I walk past the business school on my way to my journalism classes every day. I picked up some by osmosis.
Nice.
I think in the end, it really comes down to the same issues that affect every aspect of business development, which are a lack of discipline and a lack of patience. And I think that if you take a disciplined approach to these things, and if you confront some of these difficult issues, I think you can find resolutions that work for everybody in the firm. We had a transition from our financial advisor that went very smoothly and was handled extremely well. We had this great advisor. Her name was Sherry. We worked with her for a number of years. She in fact, at first worked with my wife. I had a different advisor, and I liked Sherry so much I switched over, so we both had Sherry as our advisor. She sat us down at a meeting and said, I'm going to retire in 3 years, and I'm going to introduce you to a young advisor here named Sarah, and she's going to shadow me for the first, year and a half, and gradually she's going to take more control. And that's exactly what happened. And I'd say the last 18 months that Sherry worked, we worked primarily with Sarah. I think we saw Sherry at her retirement party, and that was about it. And, that was all about 15 years ago. And today we still work with Sarah.
Yeah, if it's that well planned, then obviously, I mean, things are working smoothly. I mean, as a client, that's obviously the best thing that can happen. But also for the younger professional, it's better that way, right? I mean, that she in this case knows in 3 years' time I'm going to be fully responsible by myself, and that's sort of the time frame we have for that transition. I'm now at an age where a lot of my former student colleagues, or a lot of the lawyers I know who are the same age as I am, they are in firms, either in big firms and started partnerships, or they are in smaller firms working with older lawyers. And from them, I hear that sometimes this transition is not that easy, because obviously the older lawyers, the partners, they don't really know when they're going to say, okay, I'm going to stop now, I'm done. Right. And that sort of creates a little bit of suspense, because on the one hand, they need to start taking over these clients to continue to run the firm. And on the other hand, it puts quite a lot of pressure on them, because if these older lawyers who attract quite a lot of business and do quite a lot of business development and have like this revenue coming in, if that goes away and the transition is not properly done, then this whole firm is in jeopardy. So I think from a younger lawyer's perspective, right, at some point you need to have a perspective to be able to make that planning, also financially and career wise, where you're going to be in 3 to 5 years. And then sometimes these lawyers who they don't stick to the promises that they've made, right? They say I'm gonna stop working in next year, and then end of next year they're still there, and they say I'm going to continue even further. So these are difficult situations, and the challenges from the younger generation.
I'm obviously in the twilight of my career, and a lot of people ask me, when are you going to retire? And my answer is, I have no idea when I'm ready to, and I'm not ready to right now. And I don't know if that's going to be a year or 3 years or 5 years. I just don't know. I still enjoy doing what I'm doing, and I get a lot of value out of it. And I think it's, important to me just to continue to stay active. So yeah, I mean, this is a very, very difficult issue to address.
Well, I don't know what agreement you have with your firm, but when you signed this this podcast deal. It was a 10-year agreement. I didn't tell you that, so we're going to be going for a while, Bill.
Well, I appreciate that, Toby. Yeah, and I think there are the steps in terms of building the client relationship for the younger attorney and the older attorney serving as a mentor along that path. The key things is just ask that question: has this young attorney worked for this client, even just done work on matters for the client? As a first step. A second step is have they attended, and I emphasize the word attended in this case, like a Teams call or a phone call or a meeting with the client, done right. There's can be opportunities to observe, to listen and learn about the client's demeanor, the client's style, the client's needs and goals, and that can be invaluable to the younger attorney. Over time, are they getting a speaking role in those meetings? Are they actually participating? Are they actually providing value other than just being there as part of the team ready to do some work? And has that younger attorney invested time in getting to understand the client's business, the client's industry, start to have that type of overall business knowledge that you have to really build trust with the client. I've seen situations where attorneys have taken over a client. They've never actually visited the client. We tend to do a lot of things virtually these days and think that makes and that things can get done well, and they can, but I believe you get a much deeper understanding of a client if you go visit the client and see their operation and get a sense of how they operate on a day-to-day basis. So visiting a client's office or facility and being in meetings there is very important. And then, has that younger attorney really established a relationship? You see this all the time where there's, you bring a younger attorney in and they start to gradually be the person that the client calls, which is a sure sign of success that person is being integrated with that client very well, And then eventually is that younger attorney a trusted advisor? Is that, are they just not turning to that younger attorney for simple assignments, but are they starting to turn to them for advice and counsel and engage them in more strategic discussions? If you kind of go through that life cycle of growth with a client, there are points along the way that you can measure to determine how well you're doing in actually creating a successful transition.
You now mentioned the leaving attorney and then the younger attorney who's taking over. So for the older lawyer, it's basically about setting the stage and giving the younger attorney a chance to perform and to fly. And for the younger attorney, it's about stepping through that door and having the courage and the confidence and the determination to do what it takes. But I mean, it's sort of a triangle, right? So the client has a say in all of this as well, whether there's going to be a transition or not. What would you say? At what point do you involve the client? Obviously, I think you should have an internal solution already when you go to the client and say, okay, we're going to need a succession at some point.
I think that can be handled a number of different ways. I mean, if the older attorney has a definite time frame, then there would be an obvious point along that continuum where you sit down with the client and talk about the fact that you're going to transition out of your work and this younger person is going to be taking over. I'm still going to be involved for a while, but I want the emphasis to shift to the younger person. If it's, a situation where it's not a definite period of time, I think it's still, you're going to find that point at some place to have that conversation. But one of the things that, having a younger attorney take on more tasks allows that older attorney to perhaps develop a new client or expand their business in a new way because they're not as, tied down to the time demands of a particular client. So there's lots of ways that can happen. And also, what are the current matters that you're undertaking for the client? Maybe they're serious enough that this isn't the time to pass it along to the younger attorney, that you need that senior voice and that senior experience to be successful. So it's a case-by-case basis.
Then they have to stay on board for another couple of years.
They might have to. And you see that happen where, you get a litigator who gets involved in a trial that drags on for a period of time, and it's a really important matter, and the client wants that attorney to stay engaged. That happens all the time.
All right, Bill, we're sort of at the end of this episode. Interesting topic. We hope it has become clear that it's an important topic and also that there are some solutions and some steps we can take to make this easier for everybody involved. This was our last episode before our summer break. So you and I were going to take a little time off. It was fun, but also quite regular to do this every other week. So it was a bit of effort, and we're going to take a little break to plan sort of what we're going to do next in the fall. So we'll be back sometime around September, October. We'll see. For those of you who are wanting to keep in touch and follow what's next, we encourage you to follow us on LinkedIn. There you'll see little pieces of our podcast every now and then, and obviously we're going to also inform you there when we're going to pick up again with the next podcast. So Bill, it was a great pleasure, and I look forward to seeing you then in fall back.
Absolutely, and I look forward to seeing you this summer in Europe. Looking forward to that trip.
That's true. You're going to come visit.
Yes, we'll be live and in person for a change, not just virtual conversations like we've had for all these weeks.
Absolutely. So my offer to book the stadium here for a live recording still stands. So let me know if you want to do that. Otherwise, we just go for a nice dinner.
I think a nice dinner sounds great.
Perfect. All right. Thank you very much, and we'll see you soon. Bye-bye.
Thanks everybody for listening. We appreciate it.